estarem aqui com a gente. Esse é um evento muito especial, ele vai ser um evento em inglês, então eu estou abrindo em português para dar as boas-vindas para vocês. Já vou passar para a Camila, que é a nossa secretária de hoje, é membro da comissão também, Camila Zadra, e nós temos aqui a Susan Scafidi, que é a criadora do Fashion Law. Então, I would like to welcome Susan. Thank you very much indeed for having accepted this invitation. And this is the second time with us. The first one was back in 2016. You came for a very first International Fashion Law Congress, and I was very, very excited and very honored with our present. Ela era a nossa keynote speaker, foi a nossa keynote speaker, e foi grande sucesso, e o Fashion Law quase que não tinha visibilidade naquela época, né? Então, nós estamos aqui 8 anos depois, e estamos com a Susan para atender para atender uma necessidade que eu tenho visto dos alunos perguntando como é que se tem cursos, se tem livros, o que faço para ser uma fashion lawyer. Então, quem melhor para falar de fashion law do que a própria Susan Scafidi? Então, ela vai falar um pouco sobre o fashion law mesmo, como é que ela criou, falar sobre o bootcamp, falar sobre o LLM, que é o programa que tem na Fordham University, que ela criou, e também 3 advogadas da comissão que tiveram experiências, 2 delas no próprio bootcamp, e elas fizeram estudos nos Estados Unidos. Eu tenho outras advogadas na comissão que foram para fora. A Ana Luísa Montauri, por exemplo, foi para a Inglaterra, mas eu queria focar nos Estados Unidos, e então por isso eu trouxe a Susan e as meninas que foram para os Estados Unidos. Então, a Ana Letícia Allevato, a Camila vai apresentar todo mundo, a Bárbara Leitão Johnson, que agora já tem até um sobrenome já americano, né, Bárbara? E estão todas comigo desde que eram estagiárias. A HANNAH GRUBER também, assim, mais recente, uns 3 anos, né, Hanna? Mas a Ana Letícia, né, conheço desde 2014. Então, assim, eu me sinto muito à vontade, porque são meninas que eu orientei desde a faculdade. Elas estão agora com quase 10 anos de formadas, e só eu que não envelheço. I don't get old, Susan. Just Ana Letícia is has been with me as a student and then as a member of the commission, but since 2014, and it's almost 10 years, but she gets older. I don't. So
I don't want to get old
let's change
either.
the subject. Let's change the subject. But anyway, so it's an honor for me to have you guys here, and I hope you enjoy this meeting, this event, and I hope you can make questions. Vocês podem fazer suas perguntas. A Camila vai endereçar essas perguntas para a Susan e para as meninas também. Qual é a experiência delas? Porque 2 estão morando nos Estados Unidos, uma voltou. Então, vários tipos de perguntas que eu ouço normalmente, eu acho que hoje vão poder ser respondidas. So, I'm going to pass the word to Camila. Camila, please introduce everybody. And just an excuse for our Vice President, the Vice President, Ana Tereza Basílio, the Vice President of our
Bar Association.
Bar Association, Rio de Janeiro Bar Association. She's currently in France, and so she wasn't able to make it. But anyway, Camila, it's with you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you all girls for being here. First of all, I want to apologize for my voice. But good evening, everyone. I'm Camila Zadra. I'm a lawyer and the effective member of Rio de Janeiro Bar Association Fashion Law Commission since its foundation, and secretary of the commission. And today I'm honored to present this event which is Immersion in Fashion Law and IP in the United States. First of all, I would like to mention and thank our institutional sponsors. For Platinum sponsorship is Autora by LD Soft. Gold sponsorship, Kincaid Mendes Viana Advogados. Silver sponsorship, Grembal Pocinhas Teixeira, de Blasi Parente Associados, and Casnar Leonardos. And for bronze sponsorship, we have Mossi IP Fashion and Social Media Law, Magellan IP e Difusão Marcas e Patentes. Therefore, now I'll present our speakers, and I could not fail to mention first our president, Deborah Portilho, who is an IP lawyer and consultant with more than 30 years of experience, but she never gets old. In the area, with a master's degree in IP and innovation, as well as an MBA in marketing, Deborah is the president of Fashion Law Commission of the Rio de Janeiro Bar Association, which was created as per her initiative in 2016, and she's currently in her third mandate. Since 2017, when the ranking of fashion law offices were created by Leaders League, she has been indicated as leading in the area in Brazil. And last year, when Chambers Brazil started the fashion law ranking in the country, she was ranked as band 1 in this category. Also with us speaking, we have Bárbara Leitão Johnson, who is an US-based Brazilian IP lawyer and has worked in several large IP offices in Brazil. With a master's degree, LLM, from the George Washington University in DC, she currently works at CoSearch, did I say it right? Helping to coordinate the company's Latin American expansion. Her focus is on brand protection enforcement and includes strategic consulting for NFTs and Web3 and an extensive portfolio of fashion brands. With us today also there is LETICIA Allevato, who is a lawyer in the Intellectual Property, Technology, Innovation, and Data Privacy Department. She holds an LLM in Competition, Innovation, and Information Law from New York University School of Law, NYU, a postgraduate diploma in Intellectual Property from Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, PUC-Rio, and a bachelor degree from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ. With over 8 years of IP experience, LETICIA advises various clients from startups to well-established companies in the protection, maintenance, and enforcement of IP assets in Brazil and abroad, as well as actively engages in all phases of litigation involving trademarks, trade dress, unfair competition, and franchise before the state, federal, and higher courts. Also with us, we have HANNAH GRUBER, who graduated from Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro Law School. She moved to the US in 2021 to pursue an LLM in intellectual property at the American University Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C. During her LLM, she was a Dean's Fellow at the Intellectual Property Department and worked as Brazilian consultant to Judge Peter J. Massett, District Judge of the District of Maryland. After her LLM, HANNAH works for Intellectual Property Department at Cantor Colburn Law Firm in Washington, D.C. And as our special guest and speaker, we have Susan Scafidi, who is the first professor ever to offer a course in fashion law. And she's internationally recognized for her leadership in establishing the field. She
created the term.
Created everything, basically. We're all following her here. And she founded and directs the Fashion Law Institute, a nonprofit organization headquartered at Fordham Law School in New York. And she's world's first center dedicated to the law and business of fashion. Professor Scafidi also created another global first, master's degree programs in fashion law, an LLM for lawyers and an MSL for non-lawyers, and hosts an annual one-week fashion law bootcamp for lawyers and students from across the US and around the world. We are just with bright stars here, and therefore I'll pass the floor actually, I'll pass the screen to Susan to start telling us more about fashion law through time and her experience in the field.
Thank you, Camila, for that beautiful introduction. And I am so honored to be here as your guest. I'm slightly horrified by my photograph on the ad, but that's okay. Deborah, thank you so much for the invitation. And it's so lovely to be in such
I should have asked for a new photograph. That's my fault.
As you have always told me, I don't photograph very well. You're
beautiful. In person, she's much more beautiful than she looks in photographs. So don't worry. We'll bring you to Brazil again, and people will be able to see you in person.
I would love that.
But we are seeing you like in person now, so don't worry. It's not photograph anymore.
You know, the last time I was in Brazil, the last day I spoke for you, it was election day in the United States. And that was the day that Donald Trump was elected. I am happy to say that fashion law has done much better than Donald Trump in the years but
especially yesterday.
Oh, yes. Better not to talk about that. Let's stay with fashion. But thank you so much for asking me to share this story of how we created this concept of fashion law. And I say we because it takes a whole community to do that. So I will share my screen to show you some slides, and then we can have some conversation, I think, less formally. So thank you all again very, very much. It is lovely to be here in fashion world all together. So fashion law for me, truly it started not even in 2005, but when I was in law school in the last century, truthfully. But I was asking myself the question, that was an intellectual property related question, but why is it that fashion gets so little protection, at least under US law and in many places around the world, and other forms of intellectual property get so much protection? And so it wasn't until I became a junior professor that I actually really started focusing on that specifically. And when I wanted to do that, again, as a junior professor, I said to my tenure committee, and as those of you in academia know, your tenure committee controls the entire future of your career and your ability to continue as a professor. And so when I said to them, I want to write about fashion law and about this question of the intellectual property protection of fashion, they said, oh, no, that's too girly, that's too frivolous, no one will take you seriously. I said, but don't you understand? It's an enormous industry. In US dollar terms, it is at least a 1.6 trillion with a T, $trillion industry. And if we take into account other things like shipping and the employment of retail employees, that sort of thing, it can be estimated at up to $3.6 trillion. So very, very large. And by the way, it's an interesting theoretical question. Why do some things get protected and other things not? And fashion is something that literally touches all of us every day. It touches our skin. It's very close to us. It's a representation of who we are. Yeah. They weren't listening. They said, well, our senior colleagues won't understand, which means you won't get tenure. So I wrote about other things. I wrote about collective creativity, things that groups of people do, cuisine and dance and dress and music and folklore and traditional medicine, all of these other things. I wrote about cultural appropriation, in short. Then I got tenure, then I came back to fashion. And so at that time, in 2005, I said, you know what? I'm going to stop having just a private dream of thinking about fashion and fashion law as a field and start writing a blog. So I started writing Counterfeit Chic, and people started paying attention. And I found a community of people like you all who said, yes, well, of course, there should be such a thing as fashion law. And so then in 2010, in between that time, I had come to Fordham. And when I came to Fordham, as a visiting professor first, the associate dean at the time said to me, I need you to teach a basic first-year property course. I said, of course, it's what I do. And I need you to teach intellectual property. Of course, I would be happy to. And then some seminar of your choice. And that was my moment, a seminar of my choice, anything of my choice. And so I said to him, and he's actually my dean now, I said to him, what about fashion law? And he was very quiet. And someone once told me that human beings can't stand more than about 20 seconds of silence in conversation. So in my head, I started to count 1, 2. Finally, he asked the important question, what is fashion law? We'll get back to that. But he gave me permission to teach the course provisionally. He said, let me think about it. But if you don't get at least 3 students, I have to cancel the course. But the students started to get excited. Some of my faculty members started to get excited and be supportive of this idea. Of course, one of them said to me, well, fashion law, that's just sports law for girls, right? Not exactly, but maybe. And we have 2 sections of sports law, so why not fashion law? And then what really clinched the deal is that our dean at the time was married to a woman who had spent her entire career prior to leaving work outside the home to raise their children at the U.S. department store Saks Fifth Avenue with various things as a buyer and other things. And so Alice said to Bill, fashion's important, right? What could the poor man say? Of course, fashion is important. Of course, you can have the class. So registration for classes opened at 7 in the morning. At 7:03, the class was full. At 7:05, I started getting the emails. Professor, is the registration link to your class broken? I can't get in. We doubled the size of the class, and it's continued ever since. But it was never supposed to be just one class in a law school. When you're thinking about a field of law, you have to think big. And so at the same time, I was working with members of the fashion industry who were asking the same question that I had. Why doesn't fashion get protection? And we're taking this question to Washington and trying to convince the U.S. Congress to change that. More on that later. But as we were talking, it became ever more clear to me that, of course, there is sports law and art law and banking law and health law. Why shouldn't there be fashion law? And if we were going to have this field of fashion law, there should be a resource for the entire community. So in 2010, we launched the Fashion Law Institute to be that centralized resource. And here's where I always have to stop and thank Dan von Furstenberg, who was at the time the president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, which is the trade association for creative fashion designers. She is, of course, an iconic designer in her own right, gave us the wrap dress. And so she championed this idea, and she came on the first day of launching the Institute and banged a gavel and declared the Institute officially open. And we really had 2 objectives at the time. We wanted to teach a new generation of lawyers about this field of law and create a community that could support the fashion industry, and also to assist creative designers and the fashion industry and to be a resource for the industry. Then, just today, we are now a global community. And part of that global community comes from Fashion Law Bootcamp. When we started teaching that very first course, I started getting emails saying, wow, I wish we had that when I was in law school, or could I come sit in on your course? Sorry, no more chairs in the room. Or, I would love to enroll, but I live so far away. I can't come to New York for a year or for 3 years for law school. So we started a short program. Initially, it was 2 weeks. Now we do the whole thing in 1 week, the same number of hours as that in the classroom as that original 2-hour fashion law class, 2 credit, I should say, fashion law class. So it's 28 hours. It's plus afternoon. And we teach it in the evening, so some people are working during the day. We have afternoon activities, and we have alumni from all over the world. We don't have Antarctica yet, so only 6 continents, but 36 countries, including many wonderful alumni from Brazil, as you just heard, and 28 U.S. states and growing. And we also have a second edition now in Silicon Valley is focusing on fashion law and technology. And we're looking to see whether we will continue that in person in the coming year. We've had lots of public events, this kind of event actually that we're having now for lawyers, but also for designers and for students, all of whom attend. We have a free clinic because not everyone has a friend or a cousin who went to law school and understands fashion and can give advice to emerging designers and other fashion professionals. So we have clinics every month. And what is nice now, and here I can ask for some of you all if you would like to ever volunteer, we have clinic clients come to us via Zoom from all over the world. So last month we had a designer in California ask a question about exporting to Dubai. And so we had a Dubai lawyer to assist in advising, and our professor of international trade and fashion law who is based in Spain. So all of these people got on a Zoom, some in the middle of the night, some first thing in the morning, and we were able to assist that client. So if some of you ever want to volunteer, please let us know. We also, from that one class, the original fashion law class, have a whole team of fabulous faculty. This is just a few of them. We have about 20 adjunct faculty members now, and they come, many of them from industry, from the companies that you see on the screen, and many others. And they're just a wonderful group. And from that original fashion law class, these are two of our professors, our modeling law professors laughing, we have a course in fashion ethics, sustainability, and development. So the conscience, if you will, of the fashion world, but also about sustainability and international growth. We have fashion law and international trade, as I just mentioned. Fashion law and commercial real estate, our newest course, taught by a lawyer who recently retired from Chanel and worked on their commercial real estate, all of their deals for different boutiques. We have fashion law and finance, taught by a lawyer who works for the parent company of Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. And that's about taking a small startup and growing it into a giant multinational and all the financial concerns in between. We have fashion licensing, taught by an alumna of Condé Nast, who used to handle the Condé Nast intellectual property and create licensing deals for Condé. We have fashion modeling law, which is about models, but also about influencers. Fashion retail law, about all of the issues that are involved in running a retail store. Fashion law and social justice. After some of the recent civil unrest in the United States and in other parts of the world, we created a course to look at those issues of justice and fashion law, taught by a wonderful woman who has spent most of her career in Washington. Fashion law drafting, about writing the documents that we need to create in fashion law on a common basis. Cosmetics regulation. So the course that focuses most on administrative law and on keeping cosmetics and personal care products clean and safe. And of course, those regulations differ a great deal around the world. We have a practicum course, which is a combination of drafting and an internship placement. We can talk more about that later. And finally, we have the course that is exclusively for our master's degree students, where they write their final thesis under our direction. We meet every week to work on that. So we have a lot happening in that regard. We also engage in research and in advocacy. Here is an image from a bill that we helped pass in New York State to protect young models, for example. Lots of global collaborations, including collaborations like this one with the Bar Association in Rio. So thank you again, Madam President.
Susan, may I interrupt you for a while? We just forgot to, we're so excited about this whole
recording in progress.
I forgot to start the recording.
No worries, no worries.
So, yes, so it's working now, but most of everything what we said and what you said until now, it was not being recorded. So we are now almost beginning again. So, but that's okay. So
now, hi everybody. I'm Susan Scafidi.
Sorry for interrupting, but got it.
I'm the founder and director of the Fashion Law Institute and a professor at Fordham in New York. And I'm so happy to be here with you all. Everything else is history.
Perfect.
So we were just about to get back to that question of what is fashion law? The
fashion law. So it's a perfect time to start.
Exactly. Thank you, Deborah. And again, thank you so much for the invitation. This is perfect time to start. So what is fashion law? Well, as we were speaking about a little earlier, we are not, whoops, and I should be screen sharing and suddenly it froze. There we are. We are not the fashion police. We, the lawyers of the fashion industry, you, the lawyers of the fashion industry, do not run around telling people what to wear. Well, sometimes we do, but not professionally. Personally, we tell people what to wear and what not to wear. But that's not the core of fashion law. So in the earlier part of my talk, you heard a little bit of the story of how it came to be, how the idea happened, and why it really was originally a question of intellectual property, and until there was a realization that fashion law was more than intellectual property. It needed to be an entire field of law to support the fashion industry. Of course, we've had some skepticism over the years. One of those faculty members, when I first came to Fordham, laughed at the idea and said to me in the hallway, "So, what are you going to talk about in class? Pink dresses?" Ever since, we have been talking about pink dresses in class as an act of defiance. In fact, we've been talking about this pink dress that some of you all have seen in person. It was created for Victoria Beckham, who wore it by the designer Roland Mouret, who wore it when her husband, David Beckham, came to the U.S. to play with the Galaxy in LA. We don't have lots of soccer, lots of football in the United States, but we have a little bit. She paired it with a pink Birkin bag. We'll talk about Birkins again later. And of course, this picture went around the world, went viral, and we immediately saw copies like this one. Both of these dresses were made in England, where the copy was probably illegal. That is to say, in Europe, and of course the UK is no longer part of Europe, but was at the time. But in Europe and in the UK, there is much more protection for fashion designs than we have in the US. Despite the fact that the copy was probably illegal in the UK, they had no problem putting one in an envelope, sending it to me, and these two dresses live on mannequins in my office and come to class every now and then, which is why some of you have met the girls. And anyone else listening, you're invited to come to my office. It makes the perfect selfie. You can take a picture with the dresses if you come to the office. So what did I tell that dean when I needed to describe fashion law? Well, first I gave him the poetic answer. Fashion law is every point at which the law touches the life of a garment, from the designer's dream to the consumer's closet. In other words, from the idea to wearing. But if you're going to create a course and then a field, you have to be a little more practical than that. So I came up with 4 pillars of fashion law. First, we do have the embodied idea. We have intellectual property and the degree to which it does or does not protect fashion. We'll come back to that a little later. Then we have business and finance. Once you have an idea and you embody it, you want to turn it into a business. So you need money and you need employees and you maybe need real estate. You need a website. You need all kinds of things that have to do with the world of business and finance. Then we move on. Fashion is a very, very global industry, one that's almost born global. There are very, very few fashion companies that stay at home, at least as they grow. And even if they do, they're often importing raw materials or having manufacturing done overseas. So there's lots of international trade and government regulation. And finally, the wearing of clothing and how it's regulated, consumer culture and civil rights. So the IP, self-explanatory, we have copyright, we have trademark, we have patent, we have trade secrets, we have geographical indications, and this too is on the wall of my office. Lots of conversation about how we identify what is real, what is legitimate, and what is not. We have business and finance, as I said, international trade, including things like sustainability, and anti-counterfeiting as things move across borders, regulation of inputs like fur, the question of what goes on the label, and what information must be disclosed on the label, the country of origin, but also fiber content. Is it cotton? Is it linen? Is it a synthetic material? All of these kinds of things. And who is the manufacturer? Who created this? Who is responsible for it? So tax matters come in here as well, tariffs, international trade, and then questions of, again, what we can wear in public, what we can wear at work, and many complicated issues in that regard. But have we achieved respect fully yet? Well, we're still working on it, to be honest, and this is where we all have to work together. Today, there was a movie that opened in the United States about Air Jordans, about the sneaker that really started the whole very, very lucrative partnership between athletes and the sneaker companies, Nike and Adidas and so forth. So it's about the story of Michael Jordan and the Air Jordans. In today's New York Times, there was a review, and the first sentence of the review said this: "It is ridiculous how entertaining Air," the name of the movie is, "it is ridiculous how entertaining Air is, given that it's about shoes. Even if it works overtime to persuade you that it's also about other nobler truths too." Really, we still can't get any respect, even when someone makes an entire movie about a shoe that has generated literally billions of dollars and a great deal of passion besides. And of course, had lawyers working on the deal, lots of intellectual property issues right there in that one shoe, from the trademark swoosh, one of the world's most recognizable trademarks, to the rights of publicity of Michael Jordan, the athlete who signed on and made that shoe such a success, and also the design of the shoe itself and whether that can be protected by copyright. We could have a whole hour conversation just about that shoe, and of course, its counterfeits. And my screen sharing has gotten stuck again, pardon me. All right, so fashion law, we've just said, is not just intellectual property. We do have 4 pillars, but our immersion today is not just in fashion law, but in IP as well. So let me give you a brief intellectual property update, some of the things that have been happening on our end in the US since we last had a chance to speak in depth. And of course, even while I must always say that that intellectual property is the part of fashion law that is closest to my heart, closest to Deborah's heart, I think, and also on LETICIA's, and other Barbara's and others. It is not the only thing, it's just our favorite thing. So the last time I spoke with you, and indeed the question that started off my career in this area and the concept of fashion law is the question of protection for fashion in the United States. And so Deborah asked me not long ago, how is that fight for protection going? Well, not too well. We introduced it for a century. We have been trying to fight for protection, and the fight has gone something like this. You remember the Greek myth of Sisyphus. He pushes the boulder up the hill. He gets it almost to the top of the hill. It rolls back down. He tries again. It rolls back down. One day we're going to get that huge boulder over the top of the hill, but not yet. The bill was that I worked on a great deal, helped to draft, was introduced in 4 successive Congresses. A U.S. Congress term is 2 years. So between 2006, when we first talked about it, and then 2012, it was introduced, and it almost got there a few times, referred out of the Senate Judiciary Committee favorably twice, and before Congress, but it couldn't go. There was no final vote before that. Congress had to end, and we start all over. So design protection globally looks something like this. France, of course, has the best. Paris is very proud of being the original home of ready-to-wear fashion and the couture. So they have both full copyright and the category of design protection. You all are very good compared to much of the world, you all in Europe. with years of protection for design protection for fashion. Other countries have 10, 15 years of protection. Even China has a little bit of protection. And yeah, we are still a pirate nation. And we'll get there. Before I die, we will have protection for fashion law, but I may have to live a very long time. So it looks like this, of course. There is a certain amount of overlap in the primary areas of intellectual property, but the majority of U.S. fashion designs fall outside it. And in the U.S., we do not have really a separate category of design protection, though we do have something called design patents, but they really don't do the job. However, and of course, the reason is this. In our copyright system, a work must be original, okay? Fixed in a tangible medium of expression, not a problem for fashion, sometimes a problem for music. If you only sing a song, it may not be protected, but fashion is physical, so not a problem. But we cannot extend copyright to anything that is useful or functional. That is a common restriction on copyright globally. But in the US, 100 years ago, the Copyright Office, the original Register of Copyrights, Thorvald Sahlberg, decided that all fashion was functional, even the couture, even the most fanciful creative fashion, merely functional. So since then, we have agreed to, or the Copyright Office has agreed to in the US, protect a few things. It will protect.
When was that? When was that?
That was in the 19 teens, actually.
Okay.
So more than 100 years ago. And so he actually went to Congress and in the 1920s and asked that this be changed, and Congress has still not changed it. So we've been working on this for a long time. Since that time, though, so thank you for asking, Deborah, the Copyright Office, starting in about the 1950s, began registering two-dimensional elements of fashion, that is to say fabric prints. So the fabric print created by Anna Sui that you see on the left was copied by a fast fashion company on the right to create a little top or blouse. And because the print is protected, even if the three-dimensional aspects of the clothing are not protected, there is some copyright protection. Similarly, jewelry is not functional. It doesn't cover the body. It doesn't keep us warm. It just looks nice. Jewelry is a lot like a miniature sculpture. So jewelry gets protection under US law, but very little else. So here's the good news I wanted to tell you about. When last we spoke, there was a Supreme Court case that was still pending, Star Athletica against Varsity. So I spoke to you all in 2016, and I said, well, we've got this case. And I worked on this case. I was an expert witness at the district court level, and then and continued being involved with the team. And then the Fashion Law Institute submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court, and it involved cheerleader uniforms, including the copyright registrations you see here. And they were, of course, copied. But the copyist said, these are not fabric prints. They may, in some sense, be two-dimensional, but they're created by sewing pieces of fabric together and covering the seams with trim or braid. And so that's three-dimensional construction. These are just useful garments. And besides, they're useful also in the sense that they indicate who is on the cheerleading team. Well, that's not the kind of utility meant by the Copyright Act. Sharing information can be protected by copyright. Otherwise, books would not be copyrighted. But this question of, is it two-dimensional? Is it three-dimensional? Is the design separable from the underlying garment was our question. And I gave my answer, and we have the same question that we use to analyze things like costumes for Halloween or Carnival, things like that. The head might be separable, the tail might be separable if you have an adorable costume like this one. The concept of the tiger or the bear or the lion, right, might be separable from the garment covering the body. So we have this concept of conceptual separability, which is what it was called, a specific kind of separability that was discussed in the legislative history of the Copyright Act, the most recent Copyright Act. And so my opinion, I could tell you, I can't share my actual opinion because it was filed under seal, but I can tell you the story in 3 pictures, as I've done for some of you in the past. If Mondrian could paint a whole series of paintings like this one in the 1920s, and Yves Saint Laurent could create a dress based on this in the 1960s and even call it the Mondrian dress, just in case anyone was unsure about the reference, it makes absolutely no sense for the painting to have copyright, but the dress, composed like the cheerleader uniforms of pieces of fabric sewn together, should not have protection. And in fact, as part of this process, I even found a little cheerleading team in Australia that had similar style cheerleader uniforms. And so I said, of course, if one is protected, the other must be protected. And happily, here's the good news that I promised to share. We won. We won that case, and therefore those kinds of two-dimensional separable designs are now protected for sure under U.S. law. But since we spoke, we have whole other categories of fashion. I know you all. Even if I've never met you personally, I know that your closets have way too many clothes in them. And the thing we all need most as fashionistas is more closet space. But if we think about the digital world, our closet space is virtually infinite, and we can change clothes on our avatars as often as we like, very quickly. And the fit is always perfect. You never have to go and have the clothing altered. So digital fashion is a whole new category of fashion, whether it's clothing worn in gaming, for example, for our avatars, or things like NFTs. Non-fungible tokens for fashion items that enter the art space. So the tokens themselves are merely pointers indicating a particular space or a particular asset, a digital asset on the web. But so we commonly refer to the NFTs as the products themselves. In fact, there's a different pending case in the US right now, Nike against StockX, that is trying to ask the question, is an NFT a product, or is an NFT a label or an arrow, an indicator of authenticity? Perhaps both, depending on the context, we'll find out. But in this case that was just decided, again, only at the trial court level last month, one of the designs we all know and love, the Hermes Birkin, was turned into a series of NFTs by an artist who calls himself Mason Rothschild. And the question was, is this an infringement on the Hermes Birkin? Was it an infringement on the name Hermes or the name Birkin, right? In terms of in trademark terms. But interestingly, the shape of the Birkin is also a non-traditional trademark and is registered in the US and in many other places around the world. So was the use of the shape also a trademark infringement, or was it free expression and thus protected? Well, the court actually ruled in favor of Hermes in this case and said that this was really just not a true creative expression, but an attempt to free ride on the fame of the Birkin bag. Had Mason Rothschild limited himself to his first Birkin-related NFT, the baby Birkin, a Birkin with the image of an unborn child in the bag, as if the child were gestating inside the bag, okay, maybe that would be artwork. But creating dozens and possibly hundreds of meta Birkins and selling NFTs was not looked favorably upon by the court, was not treated by the court or by the jury as an artistic project. Now, the jury didn't award very much to Hermes. It was a little over $100,000, much less than they spent on the case for sure. And the case is likely to be appealed. But for the moment, it has set some parameters and some guidelines for artists on what they can and cannot do within the digital space. It's also cleared space for brands like Hermes to create their own NFTs and to know that they can own that market. So how often do we have a whole new product category in fashion? Now we have two. We have digital fashion worn by our avatars, and we have NFTs, which of course means we have a whole lot more work for fashion lawyers. So with that, and we'll be seeing much more of ourselves in the mirror, much like the emperor and his new clothes. So with that, I want to thank you all very much, muito obrigada, and stop my sharing of the screen so we can hear from some of my other colleagues on the panel and perhaps have some question and answer time.
Thank you very much, Susan. I just loved it. And I took shots of the screen so I can tell people about it. I'm going to mention that they are all your slides whenever I use them. But anyway, I loved it. Thank you very much indeed. We have so many questions, just like we discussed before, but if people want to make specific questions about your presentation, please do. Camila, what about the, because we already have a lot of general questions.
Yeah, we opened a little box and the Instagram for people to present some questions, but I want to first give the opportunity for Barbara and Anna, LETICIA, and Hannah to begin asking some questions to Susan, and then we make some questions from the public. What do you think?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, girls, feel free to ask.
What do you think, Susan? It's better to...
Although, of course, I want to hear more about Barbara and LETICIA's and Hannah's experiences studying in the U.S. since that's your topic. I think maybe I spoke too long, so I want to make sure that...
No, not at all. Don't worry about that.
I don't see questions in the chat. Are we putting the questions on the screen in the chat, or will people ask them?
You know what? I don't even know if people...
No, the questions were sent in Instagram, and they're here with me. I can send them in our chat so you can see them all. I have to translate some of them. But I don't know, maybe we can start by...
I can start with a question.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
that's
sure.
okay.
I just want to mention that I don't remember if we said to the audience that they can select how do you call them? The subtitles. You can have the subtitles. Tem que falar em português, que botar legenda, que no YouTube permite legenda. Meio tarde agora, né? Mas se ainda quiser, porque as meninas vão falar em inglês, então colocar a legenda que o YouTube permite. E pedir desculpa por não ter gravado. I'm sorry, I forgot about the recording thing, change the host and everything. But anyway.
Okay.
Half of it.
Hi, everyone.
First
of all, thank you so much for the invitation. Once again, Deborah, it's always a pleasure. You are, after all, my fairy godmother in fashion law and my whole career. And Susan, once again, it's amazing to hear you speaking with so much passion and your intakes on the fashion world and the fashion law world and the law world and everything. So thank you so much for being here. One of my questions, well, my first question is, because we are, after all, also talking about education, and you've mentioned the first ever LLM in fashion law and also the other programs for non-lawyers. But I would love to hear from you, what are you looking for in an applicant? How can an applicant can stand out? And since we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were doing the housekeeping, given that the education system is so different in Brazil from the US and how we build our curriculum, we are not so focused in grades, but most of on the exam when we are going to the university, how people can build, of course, if they are still students, fight for those grades, but also how can they build a great resume and a great personal statement to submit for your program or even for a general LLM in the US.
Of course. Grades are, of course, important to us in the U.S., but maybe a little bit less so when you're applying to a specialized program like the LLM, as opposed to for your first-level law degree. Because when you're applying to a specialized program like an LLM, we can look at other things as well. So we look at the grades and say, well, has this person succeeded academically in the past, which is a good indicator of whether they will succeed academically again in the future. So that's sort of a base level, but there's so many more important things. You mentioned, and thank you, LETICIA, the personal statement. We absolutely read all the personal statements. And we do want to know that you are genuinely and truly interested in this field and for each of us at different schools reading the applications in our programs, and that your interests are a good fit for the program. So in reading fashion law LLM applications and MSL applications from our non-lawyers, I'm looking for genuine interest in the fashion industry. Please, and I warned you all earlier, don't use the term, I have a passion for fashion. Every single student says that. And it's become sort of a joke among even in-house counsel who say every time a student contacts me for information, they say they have a passion for fashion. Find another way to say it. Because otherwise people will laugh a little bit, even though it does sound very poetic. But I do want to know that you have a genuine interest in fashion, and not just in wearing fashion, but in the fashion industry. Because after all, as attorneys, we're serving the industry. We're not just getting dressed up every day, although sometimes we do get dressed up every day. So tell me about your interest in the industry. Tell me if you have any background or experience in the industry. Tell me what parts of fashion law interest you, what cases you read, what is specifically sparked your interest. Tell me what you'd like to do with your education and what your plans are. Those goals might change, but it's important for me as an educator to think that I'm giving you tools that are valuable to you, that will enable you to build your own career. And tell me where you plan to be in the future. You know, the classic interview question. So where do you plan to be in 5 years? Include something like that, maybe not quite so directly, but include something like that in your essay. Don't forget about your recommenders, because the people who write letters on your behalf can absolutely speak to your interests and validate those interests. And if you have a recommender who knows someone in the program, if Deborah writes me a letter, I am reading that letter very carefully, and it matters to me. And if Deborah writes you a letter that goes in your application and sends me a separate email saying, one sentence, hi, nice to talk to you. I just wrote a letter for LETICIA. I'm going to go look for that letter. So those kind of connections can be important as well, because I trust Deborah, and I know that Deborah can spot an excellent student from 1,000 miles away. Yeah.
And I actually wrote a letter for LETICIA, a recommendation letter. Yeah. Yes, I did.
So if Deborah if someone I know it is important in the field tells me that a student is excellent, that makes a difference as well. So all of these things together can create a great application package from a student. So thank you for asking.
Thank you, Susan.
And one other thing. Write your essay yourself, make sure it's personal and represents you, but it doesn't hurt to use Grammarly or have someone else take a look at it just to make sure there aren't lots of errors and that it sounds very professional. Just a small
Great
tip.
advice.
I would love to ask Susan and also Barbara, who are U.S. lawyers now, and for you to
not yet. I'm waiting.
All right,
admission pending. Admission pending.
Okay, we're here just fingers crossed though, but already working in U.S. law, to tell us a little bit more about your journey working with fashion law, for Babi to tell her her experience here in Brazil and also in the U.S., and Susan, please, in the U.S., and how important was the role of fashion law in your careers?
Barbara, why don't you begin?
Please,
well, thank you. I'm actually like super honored because my story of fashion law actually started because of Susan's blog. So like Counterfeit Shake. I remember I was coming back from Miami vacation and like very first year of law school, first semester. And I was interning for this judge. I hope he's not watching, but I hated working there. And I was like, okay, what should I do in my career right now? And I found this blog that talked about fashion and the interplay with IP. So I kind of did the opposite way. I found out about fashion law and it brought me to IP. So yeah, my fashion law was basically like divided the waters in my career, because after that I came back home and I was like, okay, I need to find an internship in IP. And I ended up like in a very nice like law firm that I worked for years after other law firms that I did it to. So thank you, Susan, for this. And also thank you for bringing up Jordans, because like I'm obsessed with them. I got married in Jordan. So like I have a whole story about Jordans. Everybody who knows me would like probably laugh when they saw your slide. So like Hannah's like laughing because she knows about that. But so the thing is, fashion law in my life brought me to the career path I found out that I want to pursue, right? And so for me, it's not just like dividing waters, but it kind of defined me a little. So when I started working with IP, I was like, yeah, that's it. Eureka. I'm going to do this way. But I wanted to talk a little about fashion law, but I was still in law school. I was like 22, like how can you, try to play the game with like the bigger people, So you would see like those big IP partners. And I was like, how can I, get in touch with this role? And I decided, okay, I'll just do like, I'll write. I'm going to write. So I joined forces with two of my closest friends. Girls, you're watching, Marilia, Raizo. We decided to start this blog. And because of that blog, things changed for all of us. We met Deborah because of that. And like we started like to talk to clients and this and that. So first, I think because of fashion law, and second, because I'm not exactly a shy person. So I was like putting my face in writing.
Not at all.
I remember going to the court to get like the files, copy of the files and studying them to post them. And like this all, brought me to my essay. Like I told this story about like how I try, to be creative in life, to be like different and go out of my comfort zone. And this essay got me a scholarship at GW here in DC. And also like, even though I went to different paths in terms of jobs, I went a little bit to the patent side when I went to Meta, but now I work in a company that I need to deal with fashion every day. It's all about anti-counterfeiting. And yeah, so if I didn't know about the minutiae, those little details about how the fashion industry works, about the importance of a fashion week, and and how crazy it can get on a Black Friday, or like the cases, for example, you talk about the Nike StockX, so like things that impact social influencers. If I didn't have this idea about fashion law, lots of that I also got in the boot camp in 2018 that I attended in New York, it wouldn't be the same thing. So like, I know I'm an IP lawyer, US to be, but yeah, so fashion law did this huge interplay in my life and made my career happen. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, fashion law. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, girls. I think it's definitely a hard path. But yeah, if you like it, if you have like passion for fashion, it can actually it can help a lot too. But like Susan, one thing I'm gonna like kind of go take this right back at you, because sometimes we talk about like being a fashion lawyer in the fashion law in the US. If you can talk a little bit like about other professions that can go like surrounding the profession as a fashion lawyer, but you can still interplay with fashion law.
And after that, if Hannah can talk a little bit about her experience, because like we all do the same thing in Anna too. We can make this a town home and everybody can share also the experiences. But thanks again.
I would love that. Now, of course, intellectual property is one avenue into fashion, but there's so many others. And in fact, the others are probably easier. I easily know 1,000 lawyers or more who do intellectual property and some fashion, but I know 3 employment lawyers in the U.S. Who do a lot of fashion work. I know 1 insurance lawyer who does a lot of fashion work, and so there are other areas, right, that are easier. One of the areas of great demand right now is in the technology area, specifically in privacy. And that cuts across lots of different industries. Every industry that collects data in any form or that processes payments in any form is concerned about privacy right now, and fashion is among them. And so we're always looking for lawyers in the fashion industry who know a great deal about fashion. Also, international trade. As we've said, fashion is very global. And since the pandemic, the words supply chain or the phrase supply chain have become part of household conversations in ways that they never were before because things got so very complicated. But that's another area that may be less glamorous than trademarks. If the supply chain is about behind the scenes and not about the handbag that you're carrying, but still incredibly important. Real estate is another. So there's lots of areas that touch upon fashion and therefore lots of paths into the fashion industry. I have a non-lawyer student right now who is a customs agent. And I know that when she wants to leave government and go into fashion, she will have many opportunities because of that background. So whatever your background is in law, don't say, I'm leaving that to become a fashion lawyer. Say, I'm taking that with me into fashion law.
Yeah, no, sure. The question is, it's mainly because some people say, oh, I'm going to go to the US and I'm going to become a lawyer. And sometimes this path can be a little tricky and hard and more exams and it take time and everything. So I just want to show those examples that you can do different stuff and still stick to fashion or to some area of law that you want to do, and doing what you love but not exactly in a box. And I think the best thing about IP, but mainly because of fashion, it can expand you. So you can be more than just, I'm not saying that like regular lawyers are boring, of course not, but like it can be a little, it's a little nicer, if you can do your work about like things like, I don't know, Jordans. So, it's kind of cool thing. That's why I was talking so Hannah, for example, is the same thing, like in the path of becoming a lawyer, she's finding her way. The same thing for Anna. So like you can, find different ways that are not inside that box and be a lawyer. So I'm going to open the avenue for the girls to share their experience too and inspire other people.
That's great. You can use, I always tell my students, you can't really understand, you've heard this before, some of you can't understand the law of fashion until you understand the business of fashion. And almost every business decision that people make in fashion has some legal aspect. So any part of the business of fashion, it's an advantage to have legal knowledge. So you don't have to, you're absolutely right, Barbara, you don't have to practice law in a traditional sense to use your legal skills and knowledge in the fashion industry.
Yeah, actually, Camila is a great example. She's a lawyer, but she works on a secondhand company with authentication. So it's a different path there. She uses her knowledge in law and fashion to work. Okay. So Camila, you could also share your experience.
Yes, exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm working at Gringa. That is a secondhand business.
Luxury products.
It sells luxury products from secondhand. And I have a degree in law. Of course, I am postgraduated in IP from PUC Rio. Also, like like most of the girls here. And I ended up wanting to work directly with the product. So all my knowledge that I got from all the work I had during the process of being a lawyer, I use now, watching and looking and searching all those details and understanding what's behind it all, and the importance of doing the job right and not selling some counterfeited products, right? So, and there are this business of secondhand is growing every day, and is really something we should think about. And there is so much law inside it, and it's not necessarily being a lawyer that I'm applying my fashion law knowledgement.
I think that's wonderful.
I guess we have Monica Heskett right here with us. Is it you, Monica? She went to boot camp a few years ago. Is that you, Monica? I'm not sure. She was saying that I'm here, so I guess it's her connecting through an iPhone. Hi, Monica.
Hi, hello.
Oh, we cannot see you.
Yes. Wait a minute.
So,
Hi, Susan. Miss you.
I miss you.
Open your camera, please.
Hear your voice.
Nobody can see you.
My camera.
Okay. You were supposed to open your camera.
Okay.
I think she's in a dark place. Not a dark place, but with bad lighting.
Without lights. Yeah. That's okay. So Hannah was about
I'm
to.
a ghost.
Yeah.
Oh
So we are in the middle of the event. We are in the middle of the event, and Hannah is about to tell us about her.
My experience.
Your experience. Yeah.
So,
go ahead, Hannah.
I think it's also important to mention, we were talking about this before, about networking. When we want to understand more about a field of law, it's important to network and to talk to as many people as you can. And that was the way that I found fashion law. So Barbara and Anna, they were my bosses, and they introduced me to Deborah. I wrote my first article about fashion law, and I discovered this new world that I love. But it's very, very interesting that you can have different ways to find out what you like and what you like about fashion law. Because as we were talking about, there are so many fields of fashion law. You can work with employment law, you can work with finance, business, and of course IP, which I like. So when I was in law school, I almost quit because I didn't like law school. I was like, oh my God, what should I do now? So I started to think about things that I like in my personal life that I could apply to law school. And I thought, okay, I like fashion, I like entertainment. So what can I do to kind of follow this passion that I have? And I found out about IP, and that's how I started with everything. And one thing I also like to mention is that in my LLM program, we had a really great class about trademarks and fashion law. And all the background that I had was from Deborah's courses. So it was very important to me to have this background in order to learn a new legislation and a lot of different things. So yeah, I think my advice for everybody that's watching is to network and to talk to people, talk to us, and talk to different people from different backgrounds to know more about fashion law and how you can get into this field and into this job market. Yeah.
Yeah, Hannah, thank you. I believe it's really it's important to have someone who has this knowledgement and this experience with fashion law. So I would like to make some other questions. Do you girls have other questions to make to Susan, or for me to make them, or can I make?
I would like Hannah to tell us a little bit more about your current job in the U.S.
Yeah.
Do you work at a law firm, right?
So, sure.
It's a general law firm, or it's an IP?
Yeah. Gonna explain. So after the LLM, you have 1 year to work in the US, and you can choose to take the bar exam or not. And I'm in this path of taking the bar exam, of studying for the bar exam. So before that, you need to work as a paralegal or as a legal assistant. And I am very, very happy to work as a legal assistant in a big firm called Cantle Colburn, and I work specifically with trademark and copyright. And I see a lot of fashion law cases. So it's really nice to have this opportunity here in the US to work with that. But I also have another question to Susan, if it's possible to ask. Okay, so when we were talking about the Meta Birkin case, I was thinking about how is it possible for you, in your understanding, to find a balance between the First Amendment, the free speech, and the trademark owner rights regarding fashion law cases? Because it's very tricky to answer, I know, but I would love to hear you about that.
Yes, I think in many ways, the Meta Birkin case was not a strong case for in the United States. That our free speech law is based in the First Amendment to our Constitution. It was not a strong First Amendment case because there were so many direct quotes from the quote unquote artist just saying that he wanted to make money and telling his technical partner to just hurry up and make lots of quick, sloppy copies of these Meta Birkins in order to make money, and they could replace the images later. So there was an unfortunate amount of evidence that went for the unfortunate for the artist, really very fortunate for Hermes, that really set this in a commercial free riding context. So it's actually quite a difficult dividing line. And in some ways, the Meta Birkin case is just an old question in a new context. For years, we have seen people riff on trademarks or bite trademarks to create everything from humorous paintings to various kinds of merchandise. Two of my faculty members are at Louis Vuitton, and so they bring into our class periodically some of the things that they collect in their anti-counterfeiting work, their civil enforcement work, everything from flip-flops to a glass bong for smoking marijuana, to they all decorated with the LV logo, right? And so all of these things, someone will claim are quote unquote free speech. I think that the way that companies have traditionally drawn the line is if it is a single art piece, they probably will not bother to file a lawsuit because it's just one and it probably contains some expression. But if it is a mass-produced product, if it's a T-shirt, if it is something that is sold in many copies, really just to make a quick buck, to make money, then it's probably not free speech. It's probably commercial activity, and it's probably infringement. So just as a practical matter, that's the way most in-house counsel divide their enforcement activities as they think of this. As a more theoretical legal matter, it's always very fact-specific. Right. And so it's those kinds of facts that Mason Rothschild had running against him that cut against free speech in that particular case. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, a lot. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. He compared himself with Andy Warhol, and we didn't have internet at that time, so and I don't know. Andy Warhol didn't use the Campbell's trademark for his own good. I mean, as a trademark, because what Rothschild. How do you Mason Rothschild, right?
Mason, yes.
That's his name. Yeah.
His real name is Honey Esquivel, I believe, but he goes by Mason Rothschild, yes.
He created the Beta Birkin domain name, created, and that's an infringement for sure. And it's not, cannot be compared with Andy Warhol work at all. I mean,
yeah,
from my point of view.
I agree with you, Deborah. One of the things that is so important about Warhol is the way that he transformed the work, right? Took a plain, ordinary, everyday object that everyone could buy at the grocery store, the Campbell's soup can, and looked at it through a different lens, made it grandiose in scale. And it was a commentary on the difference between a common everyday object and fine art. And so that was part of his story. Whereas the Meta Birkin story was not nearly so fully developed as an artistic statement.
Susan,
sorry. What about those parody cases? Can you comment on that? My bag, whatever.
My other bag. Yes.
My other bag.
There's actually a different parody case pending before the U.S. Supreme Court right now involving whiskey, involving Jack Daniels. Whiskey and dog toys.
I haven't heard about that.
There is a company that makes dog toys, chew toys for dogs.
Yes.
Yes. That made a replica of the Jack Daniels whiskey bottle, and instead of Jack Daniels, they called it Bad Spaniels, a spaniel being a kind of a dog, and Jack Daniels, and it was a little bit offensive, some of the other details on the bottle, and so Jack Daniels sued. What's interesting about this case from a fashion perspective is that it is almost identical to the Louis Vuitton case.
Louis Vuitton. Yeah,
exactly. About 15 years ago, when someone took replicas of the Louis Vuitton multicolor bags and turned them into dog toys. In the Louis Vuitton case, Louis Vuitton lost, and the judge said this is indeed a parody with that same kind of high-low commentary. They took the images of the Vuitton bags, but they changed the name from Louis Vuitton to Chewy Vuitton. Chewy, like chewing,
yes.
The dog was chewing. In fact, the company had done a whole line of dog toys, starting with the Jimmy Chew, as in chewing on the shoe, as opposed to Jimmy Chew. And they said that there's no likelihood of confusion. The price points are very different. The name is different, and so Louis Vuitton lost. In fact, Louis Vuitton has lost a whole series of parody cases, the My Other Bag case being another one that they had lost, right? Where
it's not a case of unfair competition, it's free riding.
It is in the U.S. We do have unfair competition law, but unfair competition as a claim is usually part of another case, part of another intellectual property case, trademark infringement, copyright, something. It's not as robust even as it used to be generations ago in the U.S., and definitely not as robust as
what about just free riding?
That would come under unfair competition, and it's not usually a very robust claim. Usually,
it is a robust claim in Brazil.
Yeah, it's in Brazil. I understand that unfair competition is a more robust cause of action. In Europe, it's a more robust cause of action. We have it, but it's usually if you're listing 3 or 4 or 5 causes of action against someone, it's maybe the last one. It seldom exists separately from a trademark claim or a copyright or another claim. Okay. So we shall see. We shall see whether the Supreme Court thinks that this is indeed legitimate parody or whether it narrows the definition of parity a little bit because we have some differences with different appellate courts approaching the issue. The more conservative appellate court view would be it is parity if you are making a comment about what the company from which you have borrowed. So if the dog toy company, VIP Products, were trying to make a comment in some way about Jack Daniels and about it being, they made some dog poop references to excrement. And if they were trying to make a comment about Jack Daniels, maybe there's something there. But if they were just free riding, then perhaps that's not legitimate parity. And if there is some kind of potential confusion, that also cuts against this being legitimate use.
I see.
So we're hoping for some more clarity in a very fact-specific, but also very unpredictable area of law. So wonderful questions.
Thank you. So Camila, you're going to ask another question?
Yeah, there are many questions that came from Instagram, and there are also some questions that I want to englobe in just one. There are some people actually asking about which are the perspectives for the future of fashion law. And inside this subject, some people are asking about digital law and ESG. I don't know if you're very familiar with this part, but there are some people asking about this. What about the future of fashion law right now? What do you think about this?
Can we hear from our colleagues first? I want to hear what Deborah has to say about that, but then I have some answers as well.
Yes, I think in Brazil, it's growing. Fashion law is starting to be an actual field of law because since 2016, we have Leaders League ranking fashion law offices. And last year, we had Chambers. Chambers is very well respected. And so I'm very glad to say that I've been ranked by both. And this calls the attention of the law firms. So we have had the opportunity at the commission, in the commission, of seeing more and more law firms becoming interested in sponsoring our events, our seminars and everything. And because it's getting there, there's no job for a fashion lawyer yet. You cannot become a fashion lawyer and apply for a job in a law firm as a fashion lawyer because you're not going to find it. But perhaps in 5 years or 10 years, it's just wait and see. Let's persist. Let's resist. And I think we'll get there. Like entertainment law, sports law, it all started small. And I've seen in many countries, they started in fashion law institutes in Spain, in different countries. And I'm not sure whether they still exist. Even in Brazil, the Fashion Business and Law Institute started by André Mendes and Bruna Lins and two other attorneys, Michele Amushi and Mariana Valverde. They couldn't just resist. What's the word for this? It's too much work for you to just dedicate yourself to fashion law when there's no business. There are no firms looking for fashion lawyers. You have to wait. And Ana Leticia said, you're not going to say that. It's like having to say that to me earlier today. Because
I think to not give like the negative
it's
perspective.
Not negative. You have to, like Susan mentioned, you don't have to, you can still work with what you already, in the field you already work, and bring it to fashion, or take the fashion to that area. But exactly now, you cannot find a job as a fashion lawyer. I would be lying to the students if I said that there is a fashion law market for you to start, make your resume and apply for a fashion law job. You won't find it, but you gotta resist.
Yeah, I
had a different experience. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, just my comment on that. I agree with Deborah. You're not gonna search on LinkedIn for a fashion law position. You probably can find a position as a lawyer or any other profession inside of a fashion law house, or you can find a law firm that perhaps when describing their services, they are going to say one of the industries are fashion, or they do fashion law, because they have seen that today you need specialized services, tailor-made services, and they want the industry to see that, oh, they can speak my language. They can speak fashion, they can speak sports law. But I think most of all, it's important, especially for the younger audience that is just starting. And we have an expression in Brazil that you have to know how to do like the rice and the beans, which is the basic food in Brazil, so you can do more complex work. And I was fortunate, and Barbara and Hannah, we all worked at the same law firm, where I was hired because one of the departments knew that I had taken Deborah's course in fashion law and that I was interested, and he wanted to have a fashion law department. But to gain his trust, even though that I had the course and the knowledge and even the passion for it, I had to do a good job on the basic thing in intellectual property. And I think everyone, once they start a job, a position, and they show responsibility, they show engagement and excitement, and they will gain more strength, and they will be seen by the leadership, and perhaps they will be able to say, oh, now I want to start doing that. It's the same thing that happened to you, right, Susan? With your tenure, you first wrote about cultural appropriations and different things, and you showed them, well, you kind of miss me. I'm amazing. So give me an opportunity to talk about what I want to talk. And by the end, I sat with the leadership and I say, look, here's a business plan. I think we have market to have a fashion law department. This is the SWOT, everything, and this is our strengths, what we need to improve. Here is what the marketing is doing. And we need to be there. We need to be a strong competitor, and we can't be like sleeping and missing the opportunities. So any place that you want to begin something, just do your best and show that not everyone is irreplaceable, but show that you're an asset for them. Sometimes to be able to follow the path that you want, you first need to show the leadership and other people what they can win with that. They can gain with that. And this way, you're also going to rise and shine and be very successful. And of course, the knowledge is really important. So everyone attend Susan's booty camp and the LLM at Fordham and Deborah's course and our events, because it's really important. And it's also the opportunity to network, as Hannah has said. And in this sense, Susan, after you speak a little bit more about this topic, I would love for you to mention how to do a successful reach out when networking and connecting.
No, thank you so much for that opening. So what I was going to say is my experience is a little bit different, perhaps, or I see it in a little bit of a different light from Deborah. And that is, all of these firms have fashion law practices. And well before there was such a thing as fashion law, the fashion companies and fashion designers and other fashion professionals needed legal advice. But now they seek out someone who, as LETICIA said, can speak their language. And so that's where the openings are in fashion law. And it might not be, as LETICIA said, your first job, but it might be your eventual job. In the US, almost, and it differs in different parts of the world, I know, but companies almost, in any industry, almost never hire in-house directly from law school. They hire from someone who has already worked for a law firm for a certain number of years. So if you go to a law firm with fashion clients and you prove yourself such that you gain the permission to work on the cases involving the fashion clients, then your next transition may be in-house with that fashion client. So I have students who pursued that, and they're at Chanel, and they're at Gucci, and they're at Louis Vuitton, and they're at Warby Parker, and they're at Estee Lauder, and they're at Ralph Lauren, and it wasn't their first job, but it's their job now. And they are full-fledged fashion lawyers in that sense. So your education is one tool, and an important one. It will always be a line on your resume, whether it is a full-on LLM or something like the boot camp, right? That you are committed to this and you have specialized educational knowledge in this area. But every educational program that you enroll in or think about enrolling in is also a path to networking, whether it is a week-long program, a postgraduate program, or it is a full LLM. Part of what you should do is attend your classes, get to know your professors, because every week someone calls me and says, I need someone who is 3 to 5 years out, who has X skill set in my company. And maybe I know someone. I know my adjunct professors get those same calls, right? I need someone who has this experience and this interest, and has done a little bit of work in the area in addition to having learned the basics. So get to know your professors, but also in between going to class and studying in the library, go to those networking events. Go to the events at the school. I know the Fashion Law Institute, we have many public-facing events that are attended by lawyers and members of the industry. Go to the Bar Association events. And when you do reach out, and this is the other part of LETICIA's question, reach out in an intelligent way. If someone has just given a talk on a panel to 200 people and you walk up and say, that was so interesting, I'd like to have coffee. I like coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. If I drank a cup of coffee with every person who said that to me, I would have caffeine poisoning and I would be dead. But if you come up to me and you say, that was so interesting, I read your article about XYZ, or I saw the case that you worked on about such and such topic, and my thoughts about it were this, I would love to discuss this with you further. Well, that's an interesting question. Now we have something in common. I know you've put in some work. That's a great question. Or if you email me 2 weeks later and say, I heard you speak about this case and I just saw an interesting article about it, or I just saw a brand new related case that you might not have seen yet, and I wanted to share that with you. Well, you're not only interesting, you're valuable. And I'm interested to hear more about what you have to say. So that kind of outreach that is substantive, that provides value even as you're seeking connection and networking, is the best way to approach someone.
Thank you,
Susan.
Another networking tip that has to do with the outreach that I didn't share with you earlier. If you would like to reach someone who is hard to reach, and you know someone who knows that person, ask that person to make the connection for you. If someone I've never met before emails me and says, I really want to talk to you, maybe I have time, maybe I don't have time. Deborah knows Deborah and I both have a ridiculous number of unread emails. We can't answer them all. But I know Deborah, I know Anna LETICIA, I know Camilla now, I know Barbara, I know Hannah now. If one of them emails me and says, hey, I have this great colleague or student who is working on a specific project and would love a few minutes of your time, I can't say no to Deborah. Can you say no to Deborah? Anyone on this call? Can you say no to Deborah? So see if that person, and it needs to be a serious request, but see if that person will reach out for you. It makes a difference.
Yeah, or you reach out to someone else and say, hey, we sent an email to Susan. Can you ask if she saw the email?
Just like you did.
Never done that.
By the way,
Jeff, my regards.
Thank you, Susan. There are some questions about, there are some people asking about some tips about the LLM and the courses and the masters and Fordham. And if you could talk about this, and also Barbara, if you could say your experience and which are you think the main points to pursue a career in the U.S. and as a foreign lawyer, as we're talking about people who are here in Brazil and may want to go to Fordham, may want to go to the U.S. to study and to work. If you could give them some tips and talk about the Fordham masters, and Barbara to say about her experience and some tips about this.
Sure. Barbara, would you like to begin with some general tips about LLM programs?
I think the girls talked a lot about it, right? Like from your perspective on the application side, Hannah talking about the networking, even Anna with the way to reach out people and everything. But one thing that I think is the most important of all is don't be afraid of who you are, because sometimes you're moving to a different country, right? And the person's going to be oh, so I'm going to, Americanize myself somehow. Right. And because sometimes I've seen it happened to me, and I saw other people having this kind of advice. So, oh, you need to work on your accent or something like that. Those small things that actually makes you beautiful and it makes you unique, who you are. So, and obviously it is not a native language. So sometimes it's hard to speak in English. Sometimes you get super nervous. You need to, I remember my first cold calling at the LLM. My hands were shaking so fast that I couldn't hold the pen. And the professor made a joke are you okay? And everybody started laughing. And I was yes, I'm super nervous. So I'm going to reply this way. So use your uniqueness as an asset. Yes, you were different, and that's perfection. You're not from here. You probably speak more than one language because of that. So if you have this willpower of knowing how to, transform this lime in a lemonade, I think it's the best. Obviously you need to put this together with a good networking, a good reference, talking to the professors and the faculty and knowing everyone. But I think this, and also I was talking to Deborah this morning, moving to a different country requires a lot of resilience and kind of a strong mindset. So do not underestimate your mental wellness in this process. I know the US and Brazil, we are very used to American things, all American things. It's okay. We come here, there's a Burger King, you are, it looks very look-alike, but it's not. It's not gonna be, and especially for people who have very strong roots, it's not gonna be your home, and it's okay. It's okay. I was talking to Deborah. I have two. My heart's split in two, and you will learn how to live with that. But do not underestimate the power of missing home, because it's hard. I mean, Easter is coming up, and it's not a holiday here in the US. I'm okay, I need to work on Friday. This kind of situation. So I think it takes a village. So if you and we have this power of being connected all the time. So like use social media, do not forget your friends, talk to people. You know, it's not just the contacts you make because of work. You need to like make roots here too. And my friends from the LLM, if they're watching, I love you guys. But like this family that I built when I moved here, those guys kept me going. You know, especially because I'm like a COVID graduate. I'm class of 2020. And we went together to everything, like from finals to like, you know, sharing Sour Patch Kids, crying out in the library at 10 p.m. to the hard lockdown times. So like, do not forget that part of you need people, you know, it takes a village. So be yourself. Your accent is awesome. You know, yes, you're not from here and that's okay. Don't let like anyone say something different and work on that. You know, you are coming from a different country. You already graduated. You already have a bar license. You speak like 2, 3, 4 languages, you know? So I think on top of that, thanks Camila for the question. Because like, I think we need to understand that like different is amazing and we should use this as an asset for us to be here. So, and this is one of the things that I actually learned on Fordham because I was in this class with so many people from so many different countries and was like my first think global classroom experience. So doing the boot camp, like a year-ish before I came here for like something more, you know, lengthy was a great experience, like great starting of, you know, this kind of connections and knowing how American classrooms can, you know, be. Thank you for not cold calling me, but like, yeah, I had this experience in law school. And yeah, it can be terrifying, you know, but I was telling Deborah this morning, I'm a big fan of Wizard of Oz. Like if you follow the yellow brick road, there's a rainbow in the end, but it's going to be like a lot of, you know, tornadoes and stuff coming up. If you have people, if you have the context, you have the right mindset, mental wellness, you'll be okay, you know? So I just want to like make sure that I had this opportunity and platform to say this, because sometimes we just, you know, we just leave it alone and it's something that's very, very important. So thanks for letting me be candid here.
I think talking about accents. Oh, sorry. Her accent, she has no accent at all for me. You're talking about accent. It's okay that you have an accent. You don't have an accent anymore.
I mean, but that's the thing. Like for me, I know I have my privileges because I learned English from like very early in my life. But I have like lots of people I love who didn't have this opportunity and started to like learn English from a different agent. It has an accent, but it's okay. You know, like sometimes like I'm from Rio and in Brazil, you have other regions with like thicker accents that can make it stronger, but it's fine. I know some people trying to be like perfect English, you know, like trying to be like very polished the way they talk, and it's not you. So like at some point you're gonna be put on proof. You're gonna need to reply to a client, and for non-native English speakers, like your brain shuts down and questions pop in Portuguese. So you need to, you know, to have this. It's kind of a confidence, you know, to say like I'm gonna say it, and if the person understands, that's okay. You know, that's the goal. No, without like any kind of situation. And if someone comes to you and says something about your accent, that's the problem is not the person. You know, like do not, you know, it's just like a tornado, keep on, yellow brick road. Exactly. So yeah, because it's gonna happen. I know if there's people probably with experience like that watching us. I'm just like, that's fine, you know, keep going, rainbow in the end.
It's good advice in general. You know, I think to have that kind of confidence in who you are, wherever you're from and whatever you're doing, and whether you intend to study abroad for a year and a half and go home, or whether you intend to change your home on a longer term basis. But I think to add to that, in that context, who you are as a person, of course, makes you special as a person, but it also makes you valuable. Barbara, you said a couple of times, you mentioned multiple languages. That is such an asset. because law firms do a lot of global work. You may be staffed on a case just because you can speak a particular language and can translate, or you may be invited to meet a client when others at a junior level would not be invited to do so, because you will make the client more comfortable because of your language skills, your cultural knowledge, your experience. So think of it not as just a personality quirk or just as part of you, but or certainly not as a detriment. Think of it as a potential strategic advantage to have that skill and to have that experience. And again, it's linguistic, but also cultural, which is very important. And expect your colleagues to come to you and ask you questions that sometimes you think are very stupid or bordering on invasive, but they're trying to connect in some way, or maybe they're traveling and want to not make idiots of themselves. So that's wonderful. I think that's great advice for succeeding in an LLM program. So I think we have talked a lot about how to succeed once you're in a program. And part of that is knowing what your goal is. Is your goal to earn a degree and take it home and use it as an asset, as a tool, as a resume line, as a body of knowledge that you can apply? Is your goal to return home and work internationally and to be based in Brazil or in another country, but have international connections? Or is your intention to, and this is probably the smallest percentage of LLMs, is your intention to live elsewhere, whether it's the US or another country where you do your studies for a long period of time? And most people study and go home. Keeping those connections, right? And so Barbara is unusual in one sense, right? Of having decided to be in the US for a longer period. And it's a more challenging path, but I think it can be a very rewarding one. If I can ask you a personal question, is this for life or is this for some years?
No, it's for life. It's for life because of love. Like, I came here to study and go back. I was like, everything started with the law firm. I was about to be for 1 year, like Hannah was explaining before. And then COVID hit. So for safety and the problem with the vaccine rollout in Brazil was better for me to stay as long as I could. So I started working. I did some internships, and then I was hired by Meta. And then, well, my then boyfriend, love. So like, I think love is actually what makes me be here, because sometimes I want to like run away, because of course this is the deeper hope. Like, life as an immigrant in the US is not the easiest, obviously, and it's not home. But yeah, so that's what keeps me here. But definitely the goal was to go back with like in a better, like Anna is doing now, like rocking in a better scenario and everything. But like, life made me stay, obviously. But I have other friends who kind of did the same path as me, and they're here, they're still here. So, and Hannah will be here too. So, sometimes it happens. Yeah.
Delightful.
Yeah.
And you're in a very international city. It can be a different experience entirely if you go somewhere that is much smaller and much more homogenous. So there's that to bear in mind as well. So I think the path to staying is, again, the narrower path and the less common path. But if you do intend to stay, one of the most important things to do stems from that networking, and that is to attempt to engage in internship. That is to work while you are still a student. And we had a little conversation amongst ourselves earlier about the differences in doing that in the US versus other countries. In the US, almost all internships are while you are still in school. Waiting, and many of them happen in the summertime between academic years. So for us, summertime, that's June, July, August. There are short-term jobs that are available for after you graduate, but they are much less common, much more difficult to get. Employers are much more comfortable hiring entry-level, short-term employees while they are still in school. Be prepared for it to be an unpaid internship, potentially. If it's a law firm, almost certainly it will be paid. If it is a company, a fashion house, more than likely it will be unpaid. So build that into your financial calculations.
That happened to me. Sorry. That happened to me.
Me too. Yeah,
I was planning to find an internship for the summer, and I was looking forward to find an internship that I could receive something. But it turned out that it's super different from Brazil, and I didn't receive anything, but it was an amazing experience. So it's also very worth it if you want to stay and you want to build your resume. If you did go and have the opportunity to do an internship, even though it's not paid, it's a really great opportunity for your career.
I completely agree. Those connections, the connections that you make with someone in a brief conversation are very different than the connections you make with someone when you're working with them for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. Some of that can happen during the semester, but if you are doing your LLM full time, there's not a lot of time left over to intern. You can do an internship, usually the second of 2 semesters, but it's a little more difficult. If you stay for 3 or 4 semesters, that is to say 1.5 years, 2 years, then you have a summer in between where you can focus exclusively on an internship. You also have the possibility to take fewer courses during each semester and create more time for an internship during the academic year, and which will enable you to succeed more in your courses, but also, again, devote that additional time to an internship and grow those relationships over time, and potentially do more than one internship. A summer internship, so perhaps you start school, our academic year tends to start in August. You start across the US, you start school in August, maybe or maybe not. You have an internship starting in January, not so easy, but you get an internship for the summer, and then you're finishing your last 1 or 2 courses in the following fall, and you have closer to a full-time internship. And one of those internships could conceivably turn into a full-time job. Internships with a company are less likely to turn into a full-time job than internships with a law firm. That being said, if you're truly interested in fashion, a summer internship with a fashion house can be extraordinary because you get the inside view of everything that the legal teams do. And that's an amazing experience.
Susan, I think this is really useful information because even though we have many lawyers in Brazil that goes to attend American universities and do the LLM, we don't share so much as information. And worst of all, I think people are afraid to share the truth in the experience. They only say the good things. Oh, it was amazing. Oh, I lived in this city, that city. I met so many wonderful people, and they don't talk about the struggles. And they don't talk about the system. And even when you were, okay, you already applied, you were accepted, and you see that the university says, oh, 4 classes are good, 5 are manageable, and 6 are overwhelming. And you think, well, but I'm used to doing 10 classes during law school. How difficult is it going to be? And on top of studying and being at the library and reading a huge amount of things and doing all the networking activities and also being part of the associations and the societies and, of course, taking advantage of the city that you're in and the country that you're in. People don't talk about that you're going to be balancing so many plates. And I am on the opposite side of Hannah and Barbara in terms of I was not able to stay. Even though I've tried, I had an amazing support from the school, but at the same time, support that it was already counting with a failure because I was a foreign attorney in IP. And this information about the internship is so valuable because I could have tried applying for a summer internship instead of just doing the connections and trying to find a position after the LLM. But they were good because they were telling me, Annie, but you have such an amazing resume. I don't want you to be with JDs, 1L JDs in a summer internship. And in the end, this cost me a little because perhaps I could have found an internship and do that. So it's really important to share this experience and information and reach out to people who have the experience and know firsthand how does it work. And even for me, NYU didn't allow students to have internships during the LLM, which would make it more difficult to find a permanent position in the end, because all the labor laws and everything, they were really worried about the visa and being jeopardizing a later request for a permanent visa. So they didn't allow internships. They thought that students had to just study, and that's all. Even if I was accepted, I couldn't even make a single copy because it could be considered working. So it's good to hear your view on that, your perspective, and do what we are doing and sharing this experience, that it's going to be a lot of work. And you have to consider that you may stay or you may not stay, but it's worth going anyways.
You didn't mention
ways around those particular restrictions having to do with coursework. It's required a lot of work on our part to figure out some ways around it. And I had to do somersaults with our visa office for a Belgian student this semester, for example. It gets easier if you're staying longer. It gets easier if you're staying for a summer in between, or you're staying for a third semester. But it is possible.
By the way, Anna, you didn't mention where you were working right now.
Yeah, I completely forgot. No, I didn't mention. Yeah, so I just work in an intellectual property department. Where? No place, but I work with the SMA Azulay. It's a law firm, a general law firm, and they hired last year Julia Pazos, which worked for 17 years with IP for expanding their intellectual property department. So once I arrived from the LLM, I was introduced to her by a colleague of ours, Camila, and it was a match, and Camila Garrote. Camila Garrote. And it was a match, and I'm with her in this project to expand the intellectual property department and working with everything related to IP.
São duas excellent terms, both Julia and Camila. Camila is in our commission as well. But anyway, I have one question for you, Susan, from professor to professor, okay? Do you still have online classes?
We do.
Okay.
We have gone mostly to in-person, and Fordham has made a policy decision to try to emphasize in-person, but we do still have online classes.
Okay. And when you have online classes, do you ask the students to keep their camera open? Their cameras open all the time? That's a struggle here.
It's a struggle here too. Everyone sets their own policies for online classes. I always ask my students to keep their cameras on unless maybe they're getting up for 5 minutes to step away for personal reasons.
Yeah, that's okay. But most of the time it has to be open, because otherwise you can be doing something else and not paying attention to the class. And I normally say to them, look, this is a very good opportunity for you to make network with your colleagues, with the professor, with everybody. And you just missed the class. And I was just wondering whether you had this problem in the US or because I took a class. You do.
And some people, no matter how many times you ask them to leave the camera on, will turn it off anyway, and they will send an excuse, I don't feel well today or something. But most people, if you ask them, you remind them, I have to leave the camera on. But also to give them a reason, to me, there are some downsides to being online in terms of interaction, but particularly in a small class, they're wonderful aspects to it. I can see everyone's name. I can see everyone's face. There's no one hiding at the back of the classroom with the laptop up to here and the baseball cap down to here. So we get to know each other in a different way. Everyone's the same height. Everyone, even if people have different abilities, right? You can't see the wheelchair. You can't see. So there's some really good things about online as well. And if people realize that this is part of the world now. And so even learning to relate in an online context is really important and an important skill, they start to consider it differently. But you're right, it's always a challenge. The other challenge is getting students to do their reading, but that's a whole other story, professor to professor.
I'm glad we have the same opinion about that. And by the way, about the other subject as well, I don't like to be pessimist, but as LETICIA mentioned, on the negative side, I just like to tell students that are coming, are starting their career, that they will have a fashion law job. No, there is no fashion law job waiting for you, a fashion law position waiting for you. This is something that you will have to
work for.
It's a path that you have to follow, but not. So I'm not pessimist at all. I fully agree with your opinion and with LETICIA's as well. But anyway,
that absolutely makes sense. But it's true of any cool profession, right? If you want to be an entertainment lawyer, a fashion lawyer, a sports lawyer, then it's going to be more competitive, potentially more difficult than if you want to do something that people consider difficult or boring. But that being said, you can take any area of law and move it straight to fashion.
Exactly.
We've both seen it done.
Camila, go ahead.
Well, I think that's summarizing everything.
I would like to say something.
Please, Hannah, feel free.
So we're talking about networking, when to do the LLM. And so I'm the youngest here. And when I decided to do the LLM, a lot of people told me to wait for a couple of years because I had just graduated. But during my graduation, during law school, I did an internship for some years, and I acquired a lot of knowledge and practical experience. And if I can give an advice, I don't know if there are students here, but if there are, I would say that if you want to go do an LLM, just go and do your best, because you can do this. It's going to be a law school, but harder, but you can do this because you can gain experience through the LLM. You can do the internship. So I don't think it matters that much, your age, but it matters your commitment, your engagement, and how much do you want to take the LLM seriously, and what do you want for your life? And of course, it can change a lot, your goals, when you write your personal statement and you have a goal, but also you can change during your path. And I think this is valid. And I would like to, just wrap up with that, because a lot of people told me to don't go, it's too young, but now I'm here, and
And I think that's a great point. And the nice thing about being earlier in your career is that you're less likely to have competing responsibilities, a spouse, children, a house and mortgage payments, those sorts of things. You're a little bit more free to take advantage of the unpaid internship or the extra time at midnight at the library or the social events that are related to your program. So I think that's a great point.
Any other
that
questions
I have had
or
students everywhere
comments?
from in their early 20s to in their 60s.
Yeah, I believe that summarizing what Susan and Deborah said, and LETICIA and Barbara and also Hannah, I believe that fashion law is an area that's growing and keeps growing, and we have to keep moving and keep opening spaces for us, and we not necessarily the place will be there, but we'll make it open, make it be ours, and make people understand every day how important fashion is, the industry is, and how important law is to be watching this scenario and this industry and this business closely, and how it is important to have professionals that understand this business in its core and in its specialties, so we can provide them our best in any area we are. So you can be a work lawyer, I don't know, labor lawyer, right? A social, and any kind of law is inside this business. That's what people need to understand. It's not only IP. And this is what Deborah was trying to say, and also Susan was trying to say, is that the path is here. It is what it is, and it only has to go the direction of fashion. It's already there, but we have to make people see that. So I believe that we could, I don't know if Susan wants to share
all the questions. Have we covered all the questions?
We covered everything. But if Anna wants to make any questions before?
Actually, I think there is one question that Deborah could and should address, that it may be perhaps a misunderstanding in the things that we were talking. Someone asked, well, if there isn't a fashion law area, how come there are rankings already recognizing professionals? How are they doing those rankings? Are they based on false information? And I think it was not that what we were discussing. Yes, of course, there is a fashion law. Maybe it's not as well as accepted as sports law, entertainment law, and traditional law paths. Not yet. Yes.
Not yet. Yes.
But it does exist.
It's
we have fashion clients. Yes. We have the fashion industry. So I think you should address this question, because it's really important to make it clear for the audience that no, they are serious rankings and they are really recognizing amazing professionals.
Thank you for the amazing professionals. But anyway, thank you very much indeed. So if there are no other questions, I just want to thank you again, Susan, for having accepted this invitation as our keynote speaker in this event. We'll have you again as a keynote speaker again in a big event, in our seminars. I hope you can accept this true invitation, not just to come online with us, but to come to Rio again.
And if this panel is any indication, it looks like half of Brazil is moving to the US. So Deborah, we have to get you back to New York as well. It would be delightful.
By the way, another tip for even another tip, and you're going to laugh about that. For the students or for anyone who moved who intends to go to the United States, even though I lived in the United States like in the 80s, I lived there for 2 years. And when I went to New York in 2019, I called Susan. I said I'm going to pay a visit to her. And then she said, okay, we tried to see if we could have lunch or dinner or something. And I was with my daughter, and I said, I just better go to your office and see you there. And then she said, oh, okay, you come between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. And I said, and this for Brazilians, for Rio. So I lived in the United States. I was not working there, so it was not a professional. I wasn't there as an attorney. I didn't even had started in university at that time. But anyway, and then she said between 4:30 and 5, I got there at 4:45. For me was, and then she said, oh, I'm sorry, we just have 15 minutes. And I said, how come? Because it was from 4:30 to 5. So Brazilians don't understand like that. When you say between it, so I thought, I don't know if I mentioned this to you at that time. I thought I was supposed to get there between that time and not that our meeting will start. But you know what? Since the COVID started and we have to be online all the time, now we are really understanding what means to be punctual. So it starts at 8. So it's from 8 to 8:30, from 8 to 9. So we Brazilians now know what it means to be on time. But it was so funny because I really thought that I was supposed to be there in between.
And socially, we do that too. If someone tells me to come to dinner at 7, I'm not sure until 7:30. It would be very rude to be there very promptly. But for business, it's true. We have
I didn't know that.
And I knew that you all had dinner afterwards. Have this time because then you have to go to dinner and have another meeting. So yes, it's definitely lost in translation, but now we know.
And I've been to so many INTA meetings, the International Trademark Association meetings, but all of them are social meetings, most of them, unless it's a meeting with a client at a specific time. But like come to my office between, I didn't realize. So for those who intend to go to the United States.
Well, you have a schedule too, and you have this period of time.
That slot, yes. Yes. So that's a very good tip.
It was true of tonight too. You said, it's from 6 to 9 p.m. your time, from 1800 to 2100. I thought, wow, it's a 3-hour meeting. And you said, oh yes. No, we early. I thought, oh no. In the U.S., if it's from 6 to 9 p.m., then it's from 6 to 9 p.m. Maybe it'll go late, but it's going that whole time.
But you know what I've learned from experience since the very beginning of the COVID, pandemic, that I gave the very first course at ABAP, the online course, and my classes were 3 hours long, and everybody stayed the 3 hours from 5 to 8. But some people wanted to stay longer, and I said, okay, let's stay, no problem for me. Sometimes 1 hour and a half longer. But people was complaining because the class was supposed to stop at 8. So they were missing what I was talking after 8 o'clock. So I had to stop at 8, but they don't mind if you say it's a 3-hour class, no problem. They will stay up until the end. So what I've learned with our events, online events, is that we cannot say just it's 1 hour or 2 hours, because people, they prepare themselves to leave at that time. So people that are listening to us right now, they are prepared to leave at 9 o'clock. If we stop earlier, that's okay. We cannot stay longer because they will leave, and then you still have things to say, and people, our audience is getting lower and lower. So I'd rather give more time and then close.
This is just such a example of the benefits of studying in different parts of the world and having colleagues from different places, because the cross-cultural learnings, even the informal cross-cultural learnings like this, are so invaluable.
It is. I agree. So thank you very much again. Thank you. Thank you, girls. I'm very proud of you, all of you. And I hope this event helps other students. And we are here. If you want to reach out for the commission, please do. And take the boot camp, the LLM. And I don't know where to put my reaction. Okay, where do I find it? Okay, here, I found it.
Deborah.
So take care.
Thank you all, Deborah, Bárbara, Ana Letícia, Hannah, mainly Susan, for your time. Thank you for being here, for sharing your experience, your story, all your knowledge. And it's very important for us here in Brazil to have someone who is the beginner of everything. I believe we have here in this room the most important woman in fashion law in the US and the most important woman in fashion law in Brazil. I'm sure everything watching here agrees with me. So Susan, we follow your path, and the Brazilian Commission follows your path. So keep moving. We'll keep moving here. And thank you. Thank you.
It takes all of us to make this happen.
Yeah, it takes a lot of people, and we'll keep moving forward through time with fashion law to make it recognized and worth all the glories it has to have and to be recognized by everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Camila.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Bye bye.
Beijos em todos. Espero que vocês tenham gostado e que aproveitem bastante.
Muito obrigada.
Até a próxima. Dia 18 a gente vai ter um dia inteiro. Aí os agradecimentos também que não ficaram gravados. Vamos aproveitar e gravar?
Tá, então eu vou gravar em português.
Sim, os agradecimentos.
Eu vou agradecer.
Fica aí, Hannah.
Aos nossos patrocinadores institucionais, o Platina, a autora Baiana de Soft, como ouro, o Kincaid Mendes Viana Advogados, prata, o Greenbaum Paciência Teixeira, de Blase Parente Associados e Casnar Leonardos, e bronze, o Moss IP Fashion and Social Media Law, Magellan IP e Difusão Marcas e Patentes. Débora, muito obrigada.
Obrigada a você. Fez um ótimo resumo, adorei, e foi super bem, eu adorei, eu acho que foi legal, 2h30, foi um bom tempo, preferi colocar 2h30 do que, mas eu não sei nem como é que estava no cartaz, mas eu acho que era de 6 às 9, né?
Posso interromper a gravação?
Eu realmente, não, só mais um pouquinho para a gente deixar, eu explicar para os patrocinadores que falta de prática minha então, não foi gravado no início, mas os patrocinadores, agradecemos aos patrocinadores no começo, só não ficou gravado. Mas agora, no final, devidamente agradecidos, eles estão aparecendo também no YouTube. Então, eu gostei muito, eu acho que foi bastante produtivo e espero que o público tenha gostado também. Vamos ver as reações lá no grupo da comissão. Ana, super obrigada. Beijo, Camila, você arrasou. Beijo.
Obrigada, é sempre um prazer estar aqui. Um beijo.
Beijo, querido. Recording.